She entered the wrong room by mistake, then came face to face with the Mafia boss. The rain had not stopped since morning. It fell in soft gray sheets over the city, blurring the lights of tall buildings and turning the streets into rivers of gold and silver reflections. Inside the Grand Meridian Hotel, none of that mattered. The ballroom on the third floor glowed with warm light, filled with music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. It was the night of the annual Winford Charity Gala, one of the biggest events of the year, and every important family in the city had come to be seen. Among the crowd, unnoticed and quiet, was a young woman named Alina Hart. She was 24 years old, dressed in a simple black dress that she had borrowed from her roommate. She was not rich. She was not famous. She worked as an assistant event coordinator for the hotel, and tonight was supposed to be an easy job: check the guest list, make sure the flowers were fresh, and stay out of sight. Alina had always been the kind of person who worked hard without expecting much reward. She had grown up in a small apartment with her mother, who cleaned houses to pay the bills. When her mother passed away 2 years ago, Alina had been left with debts, a small apartment, and a determination to build a better life through honest work. She had taken this job at the hotel because it paid well, and because she liked the quiet order of organizing events. She liked knowing where everything belonged. Tonight, though, nothing was where it belonged. It started with a simple mistake. Alina had been asked by her manager to deliver a folder of papers to Mr. Whitfield, one of the hotel's senior directors, who was supposed to be waiting in a private meeting room on the 5th floor. She had never been to that floor before. The elevator doors opened onto a hallway that was much quieter than the noisy ballroom below, lined with dark wooden doors and dim golden lights. She checked the room number on the paper in her hand, room 502, and began walking down the hall, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. The hallway was longer than she expected, and the numbers on the doors did not seem to be in order. She passed 510, then 508, then 515. Confused, she turned a corner, thinking she had misread the layout. There, at the end of a shorter hallway, she saw a door that was slightly open, light spilling out from inside. She thought this might be the room she was looking for. She knocked softly, but no one answered. She pushed the door open a little more and stepped inside. The room was not what she expected. It was not a meeting room with a long table and chairs, as she had imagined. Instead, it was a large private lounge with dark leather furniture, a fireplace burning low, and heavy curtains drawn over the windows. Several men in dark suits stood around the room, and in the center, sitting in a large chair with his back straight and his eyes sharp, was a man Alina had never seen before but somehow recognized instantly as someone dangerous. He was tall, even sitting down she could tell that, with dark hair combed back and a face that looked as if it had been carved from stone. Handsome, but cold, with eyes so dark they seemed almost black. He wore a black suit with no tie, the top button of his shirt undone, and there was a stillness about him that made the whole room feel tense, like the air before a storm. The moment Alina stepped inside, every head in the room turned toward her. The men near the door reached instinctively toward their jackets, a movement so quick and practiced that Alina's whole body went cold with fear before her mind even understood why. "Wait," the man in the chair said, raising one hand slightly. His voice was low and calm, but it carried a weight that made the other men freeze instantly. "Nobody move." Alina stood frozen in the doorway, the folder of papers clutched to her chest like a shield. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone in the room must be able to hear it. She realized, too late, that she had walked into the wrong room, and worse, that she had walked into something she was never meant to see. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, her voice shaking. "I was looking for room 502. I must have made a mistake. I'll go." She turned to leave, but one of the men near the door stepped in front of her, blocking her path. She looked back at the man in the chair, silently pleading for permission to leave. He was watching her with an expression she could not read, not anger, not surprise, but something quiet and calculating, like a man studying a puzzle piece that did not belong. "What is your name?" he asked. "Elena," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Elena Hart. I work here at the hotel. I was told to bring these papers to Mr. Whitfield in room 502. I got lost. I promise I didn't mean to." "Who sent you?" he interrupted. "My manager, Mrs. Callahan. She's downstairs in the ballroom. She can tell you I'm just an assistant I don't know anything about." Elena stopped herself, realizing she did not even know what anything meant in this situation. She did not know who this man was or why the room felt so heavy with danger. The man rose from his chair slowly. He was even taller standing up, and when he walked toward her, the other men in the room stepped back to give him space, as though it was natural, as though they had done it 1,000 times before. He stopped a few feet in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head slightly to look up at him. "Do you know who I am?" he asked quietly. Elena shook her head. "No, I don't. I'm sorry, I really don't know anything about this floor or this meeting. I just want to go back downstairs." He studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes moving over her face as if searching for a lie. Elena forced herself to hold his gaze, even though every instinct in her body told her to look away, to shrink, to disappear. Something told her that showing fear here would be dangerous. So she stood as still as she could, her hands trembling slightly around the folder she still held against her chest. "My name is Damien Cross," he said finally. The name meant nothing to Elena, but the way the other men in the room reacted to him saying it, shifting uncomfortably, exchanging glances, told her that it should mean something. It was a name people were supposed to fear. "This floor," Damien continued, "is closed for private business tonight. You should not have been able to reach it. Someone made an error letting you through." He turned his head slightly toward one of the men near the door, who nodded and quickly stepped out into the hallway, presumably to find out how a hotel employee had wandered into a restricted area. "I understand," Elena said quickly. "I really am sorry. I'll go back to the ballroom right now and forget this ever happened. I won't say anything to anyone, I promise." A faint, humorless smile touched the corner of Damien's mouth. "You promise," he repeated, as though the word amused him. "Do you know how many people have made me that same promise?" Elena did not know how to answer that. Her mind was racing, trying to understand what kind of business would require men standing guard with hands ready at their jackets. What kind of meeting needed an entire floor of a hotel closed off? She thought of the newspapers, of stories she had half read about organized crime in the city, about families with more money and more danger than anyone could imagine. She had always thought those stories were far away from her simple, ordinary life. Now, standing in this room, she understood that they were not far away at all. They had just been hidden, right beneath the surface of the world she knew. "Please," she said quietly, "I have nothing to do with whatever this is. I just want to go home." Something in her voice, perhaps the honesty of it, perhaps the exhaustion beneath the fear, made Damien pause. He studied her a moment longer, taking in the simple dress, the tired eyes, the way her hands shook even as she tried to stand tall. She was not like the people who usually came into his world, not a rival, not a spy, not someone sent to test him. She was, as far as he could tell, exactly what she claimed to be, a hotel worker who had taken a wrong turn. But that did not solve his problem. She had seen his face. She had seen this room, these men, this meeting that was never supposed to exist to outsiders. In his line of work, mistakes like this were not usually allowed to simply walk away. "Search her," he said to one of the men, "for a phone, a recorder, anything." "What? No, I don't." Elena started to protest, but the man was already stepping forward. She flinched back instinctively, clutching her small handbag tighter, but Damien raised a hand again. "Gently," he said, "she is not an enemy, not yet." The word sent a chill through Elena's spine. Not yet, as if her fate had not been decided, as if this man held some invisible scale in his hands, weighing whether she would leave this room safely or not at all. The search was quick and impersonal. The man found her phone, her hotel ID badge, a small notebook with event notes and nothing else. He handed the items to Damien, who looked through them briefly. Her name on the ID, a photo of her smiling in a hotel uniform, notes about flower arrangements and seating charts written in neat handwriting. Alina Hart, Damien said again, as if testing the sound of her name. Assistant Event Coordinator. Yes, she whispered. He handed her belongings back to her, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment as he did. It was such a small thing, but Alina felt it like a spark, a strange awareness that made her look up at him again. His expression had not softened, but something in his eyes had shifted slightly, some calculation being made behind that cold, controlled face. "You will not go back to the ballroom tonight," he said. "What, but I have to. My manager is expecting me and the folder." "Someone will deliver your folder to Mrs. Callahan," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You will stay here until I decide what to do with the fact that you walked into this room and saw what you saw." Panic rose in Alina's chest. "You can't just keep me here. People will notice I'm missing. Mrs. Callahan will look for me. She will be told you fell ill and went home early. It will not be questioned." He said it so simply, so certainly, that Alina realized with a sinking feeling that this was not the first time he had arranged such a lie. This was a man who was used to rearranging small facts of the world to fit his needs, and no one questioned him. "Please," Alina said again, her voice cracking slightly. "I have never done anything wrong in my life. I just want to go home." For a moment, something almost like sympathy crossed Damien's face, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced again by that unreadable calm. "I believe you," he said. "That is precisely why you are still standing here instead of somewhere else." The meaning behind his words was clear enough to make Alina's blood run cold, and she said nothing more. Damien turned to the men in the room. "Everyone out. I need a few minutes." The men filed out silently, though a few gave Alina curious, almost pitying glances as they passed. The door closed with a soft click, and suddenly Alina was alone with Damien Cross, the fire crackling softly in the corner, the rain still tapping against the windows behind the heavy curtains. "Sit down," Damien said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs near the fireplace. Alina hesitated, then obeyed, lowering herself carefully onto the edge of the chair, her back straight, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Damien did not sit across from her immediately. Instead, he walked slowly toward the window, pulling the curtain aside slightly to look out at the rain-soaked city below. "Do you know what kind of business happens in rooms like this one?" he asked, his back still to her. "I can guess," Alina said quietly, "but I don't want to know the details, I really don't." "That is wise," Damien said. He turned to face her again. "But wisdom does not erase the problem. You know my face. You know my name. If I let you walk away tonight, there is no guarantee you will keep silent, whether by choice or by accident." "I would never say anything," Alina insisted. "I swear it. I don't even understand what I saw. There's nothing to tell." "And yet," Damien said, moving closer, "even a small piece of information in the wrong hands can become dangerous. Not because of what you would say, but because of what others might do to make you say it." Alina's eyes widened slightly as she understood the meaning behind his words. It was not only her own silence he was worried about, it was the danger that now surrounded her simply because she had seen his face. She had not only stumbled into his secret, she had stumbled into his enemy's potential target. "So what happens now?" she asked, her voice barely steady. Damien studied her for a long moment before answering. "Now," he said, "you will stay close to me until I decide it is safe for you to return to your old life, or until I decide it is not." The fire crackled in the silence that followed his words, and outside, the rain continued to fall over the city, indifferent to the quiet fear and strange, unwanted fascination beginning to form in Alina's heart as she looked into the dark, unreadable eyes of the man who now held her fate in his hands. Alina did not sleep that night. She sat in a guest suite 2 floors below the private lounge, a room far nicer than anything she had ever stayed in, with soft white sheets and a view of the rain-washed city through tall windows. A man named Marcus, one of Damien's men, had escorted her there and told her, in a polite but firm voice, that she was not to leave the room until Mr. Cross said otherwise. He had also told her that her manager had been informed she was too sick to finish her shift, and that a car would take her home, though not tonight. She spent the hours packing the floor, sitting on the edge of the bed, and staring out the window at the lights of the city. Somewhere down there, her ordinary life was still waiting for her. Her small apartment, her roommate Priya who was probably wondering why she had not come home, her job that she needed to keep so she could pay rent. And yet here she was, locked in a hotel room by a man whose name made grown men go quiet with fear. She thought about screaming, about trying to break the window, about calling the police. But something told her that in a place like this, calling for help would only make things worse. She had seen enough in the few minutes she spent in that room to understand that Damien Cross was not the kind of man the police could simply arrest. He was the kind of man who seemed to exist above the ordinary rules of the world, protected by wealth, power, and fear. Morning came slowly. A soft knock on the door startled her out of a light, uneasy sleep. She opened it to find a young woman holding a tray of breakfast, coffee, fruit, warm bread, and a change of clothes folded neatly on top. "Mr. Cross would like you to join him for breakfast," the woman said politely, as though this were the most normal request in the world. Alina wanted to refuse, but she understood somehow that refusing was not really an option. She changed into the simple clothes provided, a soft gray sweater and dark jeans, nothing extravagant, which surprised her slightly, and followed the woman down a quiet hallway to a smaller private dining room. Damien was already there, sitting at a round table by a window, a newspaper folded beside his plate, a cup of black coffee in his hand. In the daylight, he looked different than he had the night before, less like a shadow, more like a man, though no less intimidating. He wore a simple dark sweater instead of a suit, his dark hair slightly less perfectly combed, and for a brief moment, Alina almost forgot the fear from the night before. "Almost." "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. It was not a request. Alina sat, her hands folding nervously in her lap. She did not touch the food in front of her, though her stomach ached with hunger after a night without eating. "You are not eating," Damien observed, without looking up from his newspaper. "I'm not very hungry," she lied. He finally looked up at her, his dark eyes studying her face for a long moment. "You are a poor liar, Alina Hart," he said. "That may be one of the few honest things about you that I can already tell." She flushed slightly at the observation, unsure whether it was meant as an insult or something else. She picked up a piece of bread and forced herself to eat, if only to avoid further comment. "What happens to me now?" she asked after a moment of silence. Damien set down his newspaper and studied her carefully. "That depends on several things," he said. "First, whether the people who might wish to use you against me learn that you exist. Second, whether you can be trusted to keep silent about what you saw. And third," he paused, his gaze lingering on her face in a way that made her stomach twist strangely, "whether I decide you are worth the trouble of protecting." "I don't want to be a problem for anyone," Alina said quietly. "I just want my old life back." "Your old life," Damien repeated as though testing the phrase. "Tell me about it." Alina blinked, surprised by the request. "Why do you want to know?" "Because the more I understand about you, the easier it will be to determine what kind of risk you truly are," he said simply, though something in his tone suggested his curiosity was not purely practical. Alina hesitated, then began slowly to tell him about her life, her mother, who had passed away 2 years ago, the small apartment she shared with her roommate Priya, the job at the hotel that she had worked hard to earn, hopping one day to become a full event planner. She spoke carefully, keeping her voice steady even as memories of her mother brought a familiar ache to her chest. Damien listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable, though his eyes never left her face. When she finished, there was a long silence between them, broken only by the soft sound of rain still falling outside. "You have had a difficult life," he said finally. "Lots of people have difficult lives," Elena replied. "Mine isn't special." "Perhaps not," Damien said, "but you have survived it without becoming bitter. That is rarer than you think." Elena did not know how to respond to that, so she said nothing, focusing instead on the food in front of her. Over the following days, Elena remained at the hotel, though she was no longer confined strictly to her room. She was allowed to walk through certain parts of the private floor, always accompanied by one of Damien's men, always watched carefully. She learned slowly the strange rhythm of the world she had stumbled into, men who came and went at odd hours, hushed conversations that stopped the moment she entered a room, a constant undercurrent of tension that never fully disappeared. She also learned more about Damien himself, though he revealed little willingly. She noticed the way the hotel staff treated him with a mixture of respect and fear, the way his men obeyed him instantly and without question, the way he never raised his voice, not once, and yet somehow commanded absolute authority with just a look. She noticed, too, the small things, the way he preferred his coffee black and strong, the book he kept on the table by his chair, worn from reading, the brief moments when his guarded expression would slip, just slightly, revealing a tiredness beneath the cold control. One evening, nearly a week after she had first stumbled into his world, Elena found herself sitting across from him again, this time in the private lounge where it had all begun. The fire was burning low and Damien was going through papers at his desk, his brow furrowed in concentration. Elena, growing bored and restless with confinement, finally spoke. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Damien did not look up from his papers. "You may ask. I make no promise to answer." "Why haven't you just gotten rid of me?" she asked, the words feeling strange and heavy as she said them. "I know that's usually what happens in situations like this. I've seen the movies." At that, Damien did look up, a faint, almost amused expression crossing his face. "You have seen too many movies," he said. "Real life is rarely so simple." "Then why?" she pressed. "Why keep me here instead? I'm just a stranger who walked into the wrong room." Damien set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away, though she forced herself not to. "Because," he said slowly, "in this life I have learned to recognize danger easily. I have also learned less easily to recognize honesty. You are dangerous to me only because of what you saw, not because of who you are. And who you are, Elena Hart, does not strike me as someone who would use that danger against me." "So you believe me," she said softly, "that I would never tell anyone." "I believe," Damien said, "that you are exactly what you appear to be, which, in my world, is rare enough to be valuable." Something about the way he said "valuable" sent a strange warmth through Elena's chest, though she could not name the feeling clearly. She looked away, toward the fire, trying to steady the sudden unfamiliar flutter in her heart. "That doesn't mean I'm safe here," she said quietly, "does it?" Damien's expression grew serious again. "No," he admitted. "It does not. There are people in this city who would very much like to see me weakened, exposed, destroyed. If they learn that a woman connected to me exists, someone I have chosen to protect, they may see you as a way to hurt me." "Then maybe it would be safer for both of us if I just disappeared," Elena said. "If I went far away, somewhere no one would think to look." "Perhaps," Damien said, "but it is too late for that now. My men were seen escorting you from the ballroom that night. Whispers travel fast in this world. If you vanish now, it will only raise more questions than it answers." Elena felt a chill at his words, understanding, for the first time, the depth of the danger she had unknowingly stepped into. It was not just Damien's world she had to fear now. It was every enemy he had made in building that world, every rival who might see her as a weakness to exploit. "So what do I do?" she asked, her voice small. "For now," Damien said, "you stay close. You let my men protect you, and you trust that I will find a way to make this right." "Why would you do that for me?" Alina asked. "You don't owe me anything." Damien was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her with an expression she could not fully read, something between calculation and something softer, something almost vulnerable, though it disappeared as quickly as it had come. "Perhaps," he said finally, "I do not do it because I owe you. Perhaps I do it because, for reasons I do not yet fully understand myself, I find that I do not wish to see harm come to you." The words hung in the air between them, quiet and heavy with meaning neither of them was ready to name. Alina felt her heart beat faster, a strange mixture of fear, and something else entirely, something that felt dangerously close to hope, or perhaps even the beginning of something she had never expected to feel in a place like this. Outside, the rain continued to fall, and somewhere in the city beyond the hotel walls, the first threads of a much larger danger were beginning to stir. Rivals who had heard whispers of the woman Damien Cross had chosen to protect, and who saw in her an opportunity too valuable to ignore. Neither Alina nor Damien knew it yet, but the quiet, fragile trust growing between them in that firelit room was about to be tested in ways neither of them could have imagined. 2 weeks passed, and slowly, without either of them fully noticing how it happened, Alina and Damien began to fall into a strange kind of routine. She was still not free to leave the hotel completely, but she was allowed more freedom than before. Short walks in the private garden behind the building, meals no longer eaten in silence but in quiet conversation, evenings spent in the lounge where she would read while he worked through papers at his desk. Alina had expected, when she first arrived, that fear would remain her constant companion in Damien's world. And in some ways it did. She still flinched slightly whenever his men moved too quickly, still felt her heart race whenever a phone call made Damien's expression turn hard and serious. But alongside that fear, something else had begun to grow, something she was hesitant to name even to herself. She found herself looking forward to their evenings together. She found herself noticing the way his expression softened, just slightly, when she made a joke that caught him off guard. She found herself thinking about him even when they were apart, wondering what he was doing, whether he was safe. It frightened her more than anything else in this strange new life, not the danger of his world, but the danger of her own growing feelings. One evening, as autumn rain tapped gently against the windows, Alina sat curled in one of the leather chairs by the fire, a book open in her lap that she had not read a single page of in the last 20 minutes. Damien sat across from her, his own reading forgotten as he watched her with quiet attention. "You are distracted tonight," he observed. "So are you," she replied, closing the book and setting it aside. "You've been staring at the same page for a while now." A faint smile touched his lips, rare and precious for how rare it was. "Perhaps I am simply enjoying the company," he said. Alina felt warmth rise to her cheeks and quickly looked away, toward the fire, trying to steady the sudden rush of feeling his words had caused. "You shouldn't say things like that," she murmured. "Why not?" Damien asked, his voice quiet but serious now. "Because," Alina said, forcing herself to meet his eyes, "it makes this harder, all of this. Pretending that we're just two people having a normal evening when really I'm a prisoner in your world and you're, whatever you are. Whatever this is between us, it can't be real. It can't lead anywhere good." Damien was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her with an intensity that made her chest tighten. "You are not a prisoner," he said finally. "Not anymore. Not for many days now." "What do you mean?" "You could have left," he said. "The doors have not been locked, Alina. My men would have escorted you home safely had you asked. You chose to stay." Alina's breath caught in her throat as the truth of his words settled over her. She had known, somewhere in the back of her mind, that the strict confinement of those first days had eased. She had simply never allowed herself to fully acknowledge why she had not tried to leave. She began, but the words caught in her throat, unable to form the confession that was building inside her chest. Damien rose from his chair and crossed the room slowly, kneeling before her chair so that his eyes were level with hers. "Tell me," he said softly, "why you stayed." "Because I was scared," Alina whispered. "Scared of what might happen if I left, scared of your enemies finding me." "That is not the whole truth," Damien said gently. Alina closed her eyes for a moment, gathering the courage to speak the words she had been avoiding for days. "Because I didn't want to leave you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because somewhere in the middle of all this fear, I started to care about you. And I don't understand how that happened or why, but it did." The silence that followed felt endless, filled only by the crackling of the fire and the soft rhythm of rain against the windows. Damien reached out slowly, his hand cupping her cheek with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a man who commanded such fear in others. "I have spent my entire life building walls around myself," he said quietly, "trusting no one, allowing no one close enough to become a weakness. And then you walked into my world by mistake, and somehow, without meaning to, you found a way past every wall I built." Alina felt tears rise unexpectedly to her eyes. "This is dangerous," she whispered. "Caring about each other, it puts us both at risk." "Yes," Damien agreed. "It does, but I find that I no longer care about the risk as much as I once did." Before either of them could say more, a sharp knock interrupted the moment. Marcus entered quickly, his expression grim, a phone in his hand. "Sir," he said urgently, "we have a problem. The Vasquez family knows about her. They know you've been protecting a woman connected to you, and they've traced her identity. Alina Hart, hotel employee, no family, no protection of her own. They see her as your weakness." Damien rose immediately, his entire posture shifting from the gentle man Alina had glimpsed moments before to the hard, controlled leader she had first encountered. "What exactly do they know?" "Enough," Marcus said. "They know her name, her old address, where her roommate lives. We believe they may attempt to use her to draw you out or to send a message." Alina felt the blood drain from her face as the reality of the danger crashed over her fully for the first time. This was not simply about staying hidden from Damien's enemies out of caution. There were now people, dangerous people, who knew her name and intended to use her as a weapon against the man she had begun to care for. "We need to move her to a safer location immediately," Marcus continued. "The Riverside property, perhaps, more secure, less known." Damien nodded sharply. "Prepare it, tonight." He turned back to Alina, his expression tight with controlled worry. "You will be safe, I promise you that, but things will need to change. You will not be able to return to any part of your old life until this threat is resolved." "My roommate," Alina said, panic rising in her voice. "Priya, if they know where she lives." "She will be protected," Damien said firmly. "I will send men to ensure her safety immediately, and to relocate her somewhere secure until this passes." "This is my fault," Alina whispered, guilt twisting sharply in her chest. "If I hadn't walked into that room that night—" "This is not your fault," Damien interrupted, his voice firm. "The Vasquez family has been searching for a weakness to exploit for months. If it had not been you, it would have been someone else, or something else. You did nothing wrong except find yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time." Despite his words, Alina could not fully shake the guilt settling heavy in her chest. She thought of Priya, unaware and innocent, potentially in danger because of a stranger's world she had never asked to be part of. She thought of her own carefully built life, now unraveling because of a single wrong turn down a hotel hallway. Within hours, Alina found herself in a car speeding through the rain-soaked streets of the city, Damien beside her, Marcus and two other men following in a separate vehicle. The Riverside property, when they arrived, was a large private estate surrounded by high walls and dense trees, far removed from the noise and lights of the city center. Inside, the house was quiet, elegant, and heavily guarded. Alina was shown to a bedroom on the second floor, though sleep felt impossible with the fear and uncertainty churning inside her. Late that night, unable to rest, she made her way down to the study, where she found Damien still awake, papers spread across his desk, a phone pressed to his ear as he spoke in low, controlled tones to someone on the other end of the line. When he noticed her in the doorway, he ended the call quickly. "You should be resting," he said. "I can't," Alina admitted, stepping into the room. "Not with everything that's happening. Not knowing if Priya is safe, if this house is truly secure, if—" "Alina," Damien said gently, rising and crossing the room to stand before her. "I will not let anything happen to you, or to your friend. I give you my word." "Your word," Alina repeated softly. "Does that mean something in your world?" "It means everything," Damien said firmly. "It is the only currency that has ever truly mattered." Alina looked up at him, searching his dark eyes for reassurance, and found there something steady and unwavering despite the danger surrounding them both. Slowly, without fully deciding to, she closed the distance between them, resting her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath the fabric of his shirt. Damien's arms wrapped around her carefully, protectively, as though shielding her from every danger the world outside might bring. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, simply standing together in the quiet study, finding a fragile comfort in each other amid the storm gathering around them. "Whatever happens," Alina whispered finally, "I don't regret walking into that room." Damien's arms tightened slightly around her. "Neither do I," he murmured, "though I regret deeply the danger it has brought to your door." Outside, the rain continued to fall over the city, and somewhere beyond the walls of the riverside estate, the Vasquez family was already setting their plans into motion, plans that would soon bring the fragile peace Alina and Damien had found crashing down around them. The days that followed at the riverside estate passed in a strange blend of fear and quiet closeness. Alina rarely left the walls of the property, but within them she found a fragile sense of safety, made stronger by Damien's constant presence. Priya, she learned with relief, had been safely relocated to a protected apartment across the city, watched over by two of Damien's most trusted men, though she had not been told the full truth of why, only that Alina's safety required certain precautions, a story vague enough to avoid deeper danger but true enough to keep Priya cooperative. Damien, however, grew increasingly tense as the days passed. Alina noticed the change in him, the longer hours spent in his study, the hushed phone calls that ended abruptly whenever she entered the room, the tightness around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and mounting pressure. She did not press him for details, understanding that this was a world with rules she did not fully know, but she could feel, with growing dread, that something significant was building beneath the surface. One morning, nearly 3 weeks after they had arrived at the estate, Damien called her into his study, his expression graver than she had seen it in days. "The Vasquez family has made an offer," he said without preamble, once she was seated across from him. "They wish to arrange a meeting, a negotiation, they call it, regarding certain territories currently under my protection." "That sounds almost reasonable," Alina said carefully, though something in his tone told her there was more. "It would be under normal circumstances," Damien said, "except they have made it clear that as a gesture of good faith, they expect you to be present at this meeting." Alina felt her stomach drop. "Me? Why would they want me there?" "Because," Damien said, his jaw tightening, "they wish to demonstrate that they know exactly who you are to me and exactly how vulnerable that makes you. It is not truly a negotiation. It is a warning disguised as diplomacy." "Then don't take me," Alina said immediately. "Go without me, refuse their condition." "If I refuse," Damien said, "they will see it as confirmation of your importance to me, and it will only increase the danger to you, whether you are present or not. If I comply, I can at least control the circumstances. Choose the location, bring enough men to ensure your safety, keep you close where I can protect you directly. Alina's hands trembled slightly in her lap. Either way, I'm in danger. Yes, Damien admitted quietly. I wish I could tell you otherwise. I have tried these past weeks to find another way to resolve this without placing you at risk. I have not succeeded. Then we do what we have to do, Alina said, forcing steadiness into her voice despite the fear coiling tightly in her chest. I trust you to protect me. Damien's eyes softened slightly at her words, though the worry did not fully leave his expression. I will not let anything happen to you, he said. Whatever it takes. The meeting was arranged for 3 days later, at a neutral location, a large private estate on the outskirts of the city, owned by a family with no direct allegiance to either side, agreed upon as fair ground by both parties. In the days leading up to it, Alina watched as Damien's men prepared with careful precision, going over plans, checking weapons, discussing exits and contingencies in low, serious voices that Alina mostly did not understand, though the tension in the air told her enough. The night before the meeting, Alina could not sleep. She found herself once again in Damien's study, where he sat reviewing final details with Marcus, though he dismissed his second-in-command the moment he noticed her in the doorway. You should rest, he said gently, though his own exhaustion was evident in the tired lines around his eyes. I keep thinking about tomorrow, Alina admitted, stepping into the room, about what might happen. Damien rose and crossed to her, taking her hands gently in his. Alina, listen to me carefully. Tomorrow you will stay close to me at all times. If anything happens, if there is any sign of danger, you run. Do not look back, do not wait for me. Marcus will be assigned specifically to ensure your safety, and he will get you out immediately. Do you understand? What about you? Alina asked, fear tightening her throat. What happens to you if something goes wrong? I have survived worse odds than this, Damien said, though the reassurance felt thin even to his own ears. But I need to know that you will be safe, whatever happens to me. Promise me that. Alina felt tears rise unexpectedly to her eyes. I can't promise to just leave you behind. You must, Damien said firmly, his hands tightening around hers. Please, Alina, I cannot walk into that meeting tomorrow with a clear mind if I am worried you will risk yourself for me. Promise me you will run if Marcus tells you to. After a long, difficult moment, Alina nodded slowly, though the promise felt like ash in her mouth. I promise, she whispered, but please come back to me afterward. Whatever happens in there, come back. Damien pulled her gently into his arms, holding her close as though trying to memorize the feeling of her against him. I intend to, he murmured into her hair. I have far too much to live for now, to lose everything in a single foolish meeting. The words, quiet and sincere, settled deep in Alina's heart, a fragile comfort against the fear of what tomorrow might bring. The following afternoon, they arrived at the neutral estate under gray skies threatening rain. Damien's car was flanked by 2 others, filled with his most trusted men, all dressed in dark, unremarkable suits that did little to hide the quiet danger radiating from each of them. Alina sat beside Damien in the back seat, her hand held tightly in his, her heart pounding with a fear she tried desperately to control. Inside the estate's large meeting hall, the Vasquez family had already gathered, led by a man named Rafael Vasquez, older than Damien, with silver hair and cold, calculating eyes that swept over Alina the moment she entered the room, lingering with a look that made her skin crawl. So this is her, Rafael said, his voice smooth and cold. The woman who wandered into your world by mistake and somehow found her way into your heart. How very unexpected of you, Damien. Let us proceed with the matter at hand, Damien said evenly, his expression carefully neutral despite the tension radiating from his tightly controlled posture. Of course, Rafael said, a thin smile curling his lips. Territories, agreements, the usual matters of business. Though I must admit, I am far more curious about your companion than any territory dispute. Alina forced herself to remain still under his gaze, her hand gripping Damien's tightly beneath the table where the negotiation was set to take place. The meeting proceeded, tense and slow, filled with careful words that carried hidden threats beneath every polite phrase, every offer of cooperation laced with implication and quiet menace. Nearly an hour into the negotiation, as tensions rose over a particularly contested territory, the doors at the back of the hall burst open suddenly, and chaos erupted. Men Alina did not recognize, not Damien's, not Vasquez's, stormed into the room, weapons drawn, shouting orders in a language Alina did not understand. The room dissolved instantly into confusion and violence, Damien's men reacting swiftly, pulling their own weapons, shielding Damien and Alina as best they could amid the sudden eruption of danger. "A third party," Damien said sharply, pulling Alina behind him protectively. "Someone else wants this meeting to fail." "Alina, go with Marcus now," he ordered, pushing her toward his second-in-command, who had appeared instantly at her side, gun drawn, expression fiercely focused. "I'm not leaving you," Alina cried, panic rising as gunfire erupted somewhere behind them. "You promised me," Damien said fiercely, meeting her eyes for one desperate moment amid the chaos. "Go, now." Marcus grabbed her arm firmly, pulling her toward a side exit as Damien turned back toward the chaos, drawing his own weapon, moving to help defend against the sudden ambush. Alina's last glimpse of him, as Marcus dragged her through a side door into a narrow hallway, was of him standing firm amid the gunfire, shielding his men, his expression fierce and unwavering despite the danger surrounding him. "We have to help him," Alina cried as Marcus pulled her quickly down the hallway, away from the sounds of chaos behind them. "Our job is to get you safe," Marcus said firmly, though his own expression betrayed deep worry for his boss. "He can handle himself, trust him." They emerged into a side courtyard, where a car waited, engine already running. Marcus pushed Alina quickly into the back seat, sliding in beside her as the driver sped away from the estate, the sounds of chaos fading behind them into the distance. "Is he going to be okay?" Alina asked desperately, tears streaming down her face as the car raced through the rain-soaked streets. "I don't know," Marcus admitted quietly, his own hands tense on the phone he held, waiting anxiously for news. "I don't know." The uncertainty hung heavy in the air as the car continued onward, carrying Alina away from the man she had come to love, into an unknown and frightening future. The fate of Damien Cross left uncertain amid the chaos and gunfire of a meeting that had gone terribly, dangerously wrong. The hours that followed were the longest of Alina's life. Marcus had taken her back to the riverside estate, where she paced the halls endlessly, unable to eat, unable to rest, her phone clutched tightly in her hand as she waited desperately for any word about Damien's fate. The other men at the estate moved with quiet urgency, speaking in low tones on phones and radios, though none of them would tell Alina anything definite, only that they were handling the situation and that she should remain patient. Patience felt impossible. Every minute that passed without news felt like an eternity, filled with terrible possibilities Alina could not stop imagining. Damien wounded, Damien captured, Damien gone entirely from the world, leaving her with nothing but the memory of the brief, fragile happiness they had found together amid all the danger. It was nearly midnight when Marcus finally returned to the estate, his expression grim but not, Alina noticed with a surge of desperate hope, defeated. "Is he alive?" she asked immediately, rushing toward him. "He's alive," Marcus confirmed, and Alina felt a wave of relief so strong her knees nearly buckled beneath her. "Wounded, but alive. He's being brought here now, along with a doctor." "What happened?" Alina asked. "Who attacked the meeting?" "A third family," Marcus explained wearily, guiding her toward a chair as though sensing she needed to sit down. The Costas group. They've been trying to weaken both the Vasquez and Cross families for months, hopping to seize territory while we destroyed each other. They used the meeting as an opportunity to attack both sides at once. And Vasquez, Alina asked. Dead, Marcus said simply. Along with several of his men, Damien managed to fight his way out along with most of our people, though not without cost. Alina's relief at Damien's survival tangled painfully with worry over the extent of his injuries. How badly is he hurt? A gunshot wound to the shoulder and several cuts and bruises from the fighting, Marcus said. Painful, but not life-threatening, according to the medic who treated him at the scene. He insisted on returning here rather than going to a hospital for obvious reasons. 20 minutes later, the sound of a car pulling into the estate's courtyard sent Alina rushing toward the entrance, her heart pounding with desperate relief as she watched Damien being helped from the vehicle, his shoulder bandaged heavily beneath a torn and bloodied shirt, his face pale but his eyes, when they found hers across the courtyard, filled with the same fierce relief that flooded through her own chest. Damien, she breathed, rushing toward him despite the protests of the men trying to guide him carefully inside. Alina, he said, his voice rough with exhaustion and pain, though a faint, tired smile touched his lips at the sight of her. You're safe. I should be saying that to you, she said, tears streaming freely down her face as she carefully wrapped her arms around him, mindful of his injured shoulder. I was so afraid I had lost you. I told you, Damien murmured against her hair. I had far too much to live for, to lose everything in a single meeting. They spent the following days quietly at the Riverside estate as Damien recovered from his injuries, the immediate danger of the Vasquez family eliminated by the chaos of that terrible night, though the threat of the Costas group who had orchestrated the attack still loomed uncertainly on the horizon. Alina stayed constantly by his side, tending to him as he healed, the fragile bond between them growing stronger with each passing day, tempered now by the shared understanding of exactly how much they stood to lose. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after the attack, as Damien sat in the garden behind the estate, his shoulder healing steadily beneath its bandages, Alina joined him on the stone bench, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. I've been thinking, Damien said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. About what? Alina asked. About you, he said, turning to face her fully. About this life I have pulled you into, against your will, through nothing more than an unfortunate mistake on your part. I have thought, many times these past weeks, about sending you away somewhere safe, somewhere far from all of this danger, allowing you to return to the ordinary life you deserve. Alina's heart clenched painfully at his words. Is that what you want? She asked, her voice barely steady. No, Damien admitted quietly. That is precisely the problem. I do not want that at all. I have spent my entire life believing that a man in my position could never truly have something as simple and precious as this, someone to care for, someone who cares for me in return, without fear or agenda. And then you walked into my world by mistake and showed me that perhaps I was wrong. Then don't send me away, Alina said softly, reaching for his hand. I know this life is dangerous. I know it will never be simple or easy. But I don't want the ordinary life I had before, not anymore. I want this, whatever this is, whatever it costs. I want you. Damien's dark eyes searched hers for a long moment, as though searching for any hint of doubt, any trace of hesitation. Finding none, he raised her hand gently to his lips, pressing a soft kiss against her knuckles. Then I will find a way to make this world safer for you, he said firmly. Whatever it takes, the threat from the Costas family will be dealt with, and I will ensure that you never again have reason to fear for your safety or for mine. And Priya, Alina asked, my old life, can any part of it still exist alongside this one? In time, Damien said, once the current dangers have passed, I believe we can find a way to weave the pieces of your old life carefully into this new one. carefully, and with proper protection. I will not ask you to abandon everything you once were, Alina. I only ask that you allow me to protect what remains. Alina smiled softly, leaning her head against his uninjured shoulder as the sun continued its slow descent beyond the horizon. I think, she said quietly, that I can accept that. They sat together in comfortable silence as the sky darkened into evening, two people brought together by an unexpected mistake, now bound by choice rather than accident, facing an uncertain future together with a fragile but growing hope. In the weeks that followed, Damien moved carefully and decisively to address the threat posed by the Costas family, using the chaos of the previous attack to strengthen alliances with other families who had also suffered from the ambush, uniting them against the common enemy who had sought to profit from their conflict. Slowly, methodically, the danger that had once threatened to tear Alina and Damien apart began to recede, replaced by a fragile but genuine peace. Priya was eventually returned safely to her ordinary life, given a careful explanation that satisfied her curiosity without revealing the full truth of the danger she had brushed against. Though she noticed, with quiet amusement, the new light in Alina's eyes whenever she spoke of the mysterious man who had entered her life so unexpectedly. Alina herself found a new place within Damien's world, not as a hostage or a hidden secret, but as someone openly, proudly by his side, respected by his men, trusted with more of his world than she had ever imagined possible in those first frightening days. She did not abandon her love of order and organization. Instead, she found herself helping to manage certain aspects of the legitimate businesses Damien maintained alongside his more dangerous dealings, finding purpose and pride in work that finally combined her skills with the strange, unexpected life she had chosen. Months later, on a quiet evening much like the one where it all began, Alina stood once again in the private lounge of the Grand Meridian Hotel, though this time she was not lost, not afraid, not a stranger who had wandered in by mistake. She stood there as Damien's chosen partner, invited rather than intruding, safe rather than threatened. Damien found her by the window, watching the rain fall softly over the city lights below, and wrapped his arms gently around her from behind, resting his chin against the top of her head. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked softly. "The night you walked into the wrong room?" "All the time," Alina admitted, leaning back against him with a soft smile. "It was the worst mistake of my life." "Was it?" Damien asked, a teasing note entering his usually serious voice. Alina turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to gently touch his face, tracing the lines that had once seemed so cold and frightening to her, now familiar and precious. "No," she admitted softly. "It was the best mistake I ever made." Outside, the rain continued to fall gently over the city, indifferent as always to the quiet, hard-won happiness of two people who had found each other through danger, fear, and an unexpected wrong turn down a hotel hallway. A mistake that had, against every possible odd, led them exactly where they were always meant to be.